Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm Celine Montalia from CheckMade, and welcome to Collaboration and Security in E-commerce Startups. As a Filipino startup, we are thrilled at the prospect of turning great ideas into reality, especially in these trying times with the pandemic pretty much changing our lives. We are honored to be part of the Philippine Startup Week, collaborating with many great and more established startups. The theme for this year's Philippine Startup Week is truly timely: Filipino startups powering the new normal. With this new normal, we aim to create a better normal by building a more robust digital ecosystem. As we kickstart this virtual event, we'd like to share with you a little bit more about CheckMade. CheckMate is an independent third-party verification service that analyzes and validates multiple data points of sellers using standardized metrics that represent various aspects of seller performance. With me today, I'd like to share with you a little bit more about CheckMate using this 2-minute video.
COVID-19 has changed every aspect of our lives, from the way we work to the way we shop. Because physically going to malls or shops is now too risky, online shopping has become both the new and the next normal. But this shift is not without its own risks. With the rise of e-commerce platforms came the proliferation of bogus sellers and buyers. In fact, online fraud is now what consumers fear most nowadays. That's because there's a huge information gap about both sellers and buyers. There are also very limited ways you can go after a scammer, making it a lot harder to trust anyone in the e-commerce space. Luckily, we now have a system that deals with these pain points. CheckMade. CheckMade is an independent third-party verification body that verifies the legitimacy of sellers, helping online buyers make sound purchasing decisions. The benefits go both ways. Sellers get a reputation boost, increasing their earning potential and market reach, while buyers now have more protection against scammers and fraudsters. The CheckMate system is simple. It designates different badges for merchants. The higher the badge level, the more verified and trustworthy you are, and the more you'll stand out, leading to more inquiries and sales. Getting CheckMate is even simpler with 3 basic steps. Apply and get verified, validate your application, and finally, integrate your CheckMade badge in the e-commerce platform of your choice.
CheckMade is accessible, reliable, and powered by outstanding young leaders in their respective fields.
Make the shift to the CheckMade culture.
Speak the CheckMade language.
Thrive in the CheckMade universe. Get CheckMade today and keep fraud in check.
So again, I'm Celine Montalia. I am one of the co-founders of CheckMade. I handle operations and finance, and I bring in almost a decade of experience in finance and manufacturing. With me today are Julia and Sierra.
Hi everyone, I'm Julia. I'm a founder of CheckMade as well, and I'm in charge of business development. I'm an attorney and a law professor.
I have experience in marketing and PR in New York. I'm also a graduate student at NYU studying public relations at the Division for Business Programs at NYU. Currently working with my sister Celine at our family company.
So without further ado, I feel like we should get collaborating and start introducing our guests for today, whom we are so grateful for. First up is Carlo Calimon, who is the president and co-founder of Startup Village. And it really takes a village to raise a startup, right? So it's the newest startup incubator / accelerator in the Philippines. And he continues his advocacy of entrepreneurship by mentoring startups. Everyone, please give a warm round of applause to Carlo. Yay! Virtual
Hello, everyone.
applause. Hi,
Good
Carlo.
afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Our next guest is Paul. Paul is one of our mentors, and we're very fortunate to have him today. So, Paul is the co-founder and head of digital transformation solutions to MBigN Consulting, and he's also currently the startup advisor for Cognity Labs and a limited partner for Backend Capital. He is the former head of partnerships and digital payments for Smart Communications, and he has been involved as well in Facebook Developer Circles Manila, Angel Hack Manila Ambassador, and Startup Evangelist for Idea Space Foundation and Kubo. When he's not involved in startups, he's probably training to run an ultramarathon or organizing an independent music production gig.
So we also have Jules. Jules is the creator and host of Negosyo Negosyo, a podcast dedicated to all newbie entrepreneurs who've been forced by the COVID-19 pandemic to venture into business. He's also one of CheckMade's first collaborations. Jules is into photography and video, which led him to actually creating content on YouTube and eventually launching Negosyo Negosyo. Through Negosyo Negosyo, Jules has been putting the spotlight on small businesses and startups. So we're among one of those fortunate to have been invited by Jules to guest on his podcast. So welcome, Jules, and thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And last but definitely not least, we have Aloy. Aloy is the general manager and co-founder of Roots Collective, an association of entrepreneurs working for inclusive and sustainable development through enabling local and social entrepreneurship. Yeah, Roots Collective is among CheckMade's collaborative partners, and we're very, very grateful because we love the sustainability behind their mission. So welcome, Aloy.
Welcome, Aloy.
All right, so thanks everyone for joining us. As you know, because you are all part of CheckMade's story and CheckMade's journey, we started it as an entry to a competition, and we definitely saw the potential, and we all pretty much share in this advocacy, right, which is to build a more robust ecosystem. So with that, we definitely see that alongside the rise in e-commerce and the e-commerce market is also a rise in fraud, right? Especially with COVID-19 pretty much changing the way we shop, the way we do things. I'd like to start the ball rolling by getting your hearing what you have to say about pretty much fraud, particularly in the Philippines, in the Philippine e-commerce space, and how it has blocked or how it has played a role in as much as preventing or stopping some of maybe like a faster pace of adoption of e-commerce e-commerce buying, or like a faster adoption of e-commerce or online shopping. So maybe let's start with Carlo or anyone. Yeah.
All right. Well, maybe I can jump in, right? To answer that question, I think that we have to look at how our customers behave. Mm-hmm. And as customers, I think that we were initially a bit apprehensive, right, because of the horror stories about products not coming in the way they were supposed to look, right, in the picture, or but from a seller perspective, also not getting paid or having returns, right? So it does impact the trust side, and the comfort level also of the buyers. However, that's where I think the principle of reviews and ratings come in, because these give a little bit of comfort for the buyer, right? Why? Because it's like saying that if somebody else has bought and has had a great experience from this merchant or from this particular customer, then your experience would more or less be the same, right? However, because of the pandemic, people are forced to set that aside and remove their apprehensions because they had no choice, right? Because being stuck at home would force you to try something new, try something different, and I think that people ultimately started trusting obviously trying things out. Some would have failures still in terms of field experiences in terms of buying something, but the degree of comfort is slowly getting there, especially for the older generation, right? The older generation initially didn't want to touch it. Then all of a sudden, okay, I have to buy my medicine, I have to buy my vegetables, I have to buy my groceries and so on. At least from that perspective, slowly but surely they started adapting. When it comes to the other things, the nice to haves, okay, that's when they start, okay, I'm going to be a little bit more picky, but I am going to ask somebody else who's experienced that first and say, how was your experience here? How was your experience there? Right? And that would lead me towards trying it out. And once I'm there, I'm hooked. Then I think that's when people start shifting properly, right? So.
Right. That's true. It's really everybody's now starting to like get a hang of it, and it's maybe like the trust factor. The trust they're trying to trust it more. It's just that the Philippines also is a laggard vis-a-vis the ASEAN, our ASEAN neighbors. So I mean, the ramp up as well in terms of our average spend, it's also increasing next. So let's hear from Aloy. Yes, Aloy. What?
Yeah, I actually find it really ironic how the Philippines is the social media capital of the world, yet, as
Yeah.
mentioned by you and Sir Carlo, it is still we still have quite a long way to go in terms of doing things online in general. No, I have family members who normally were also quite afraid to use online banking despite their being technologically savvy. No? But yeah, during the pandemic, they were forced to adapt also. And similarly with e-commerce, I also think it goes both ways on part of both the customer and the seller, because yes, there are stories, horror stories of fraudulent sellers, but there are also horror stories of fraudulent buyers, or if not fraudulent, they are being unintentionally, let's just say, quite hard to deal with. And it is something we have encountered personally in our experience as an online seller during this pandemic. So yes, very security really goes a long way, and well, it can it can boost it can boost the public's trust in the places that they shop. Then we will also have to work together somehow also in order to weed out on the other end the consumers who may may not exactly be thinking properly when they go and buy online.
That's true. So in terms of say collaboration, what kind of role do you think collaboration plays into building this our Philippine e-commerce market? Because honestly, with the rise in e-commerce spending, it's also been very difficult for sellers in as much as you pretty much sell your prices are transparent. That's number one. So people offering the same goods or the same services are it's basically a path towards perfect competition, right? So it's hard to say that with e-commerce collaboration is key, but how do you think collaboration plays a pivotal role in making sure that in building our e-commerce market, as well as ensuring that it's not necessarily a competition, but the fact that there is so much room for everyone if we just all collaborate. Mhm.
Yeah, I like what you said, Celine, about it's not necessarily competition; it is more of
Mm-mm.
cooperation. Uh, So,
Mm-mm.
very heart of Roots itself is we are entrepreneurs, we are a platform, we are an ecosystem. Thus, collaboration, no? And what you said makes really good sense. And also what Sir Carlos said earlier about all these opportunities for verification, for security, because one marketing tool that should never be underestimated wherever it's word of mouth and referrals. And having even just a single beat of which, of which good news can spread like wildfire, can do so much already. It's like they are tacitly endorsing you, no? And that's one thing, and that's one of the good things that came about in our in the way we do things, in the way that Roots does collaborations, no? So on the front, on the it's like on the surface, what a customer will see that Roots is, especially now in this age of coronavirus, is we are an e-commerce store of different local and sustainable brands, no? Local and social enterprises. But of course, what they don't see is that there's actually a lot of thought that goes into that process. Actually, a lot of things came and worked together to make that possible. So we are an association of entrepreneurs. We were founded by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs, and through through the work that we do, we are actually able to help our fellow entrepreneurs in terms of either developing new products or services, or maybe sharing resources that ultimately lead them to drive down their costs. No? And of course, since they're all selling on this one site, in our case, then it's like every single one of us in this family is saying that, go ahead, we're all legit. We're all good. You can buy from us, and be assured that you're buying something quality. You're buying something that you're getting what you paid for, getting what you ordered, and so and so. So yeah, collaboration being at the very heart of what we do, and based on the past months, no, I think it's led to some good results for us.
And it has opened doors to like so many opportunities and like also like experiences that you would never have imagined the possible, right? So I'd like to share a personal story, which was about negosyo when we joined, when we started doing this, and it was because of our love for e-commerce that we got to meet Jules and a lot of different partners. We got to meet Sir Paul as well, and we learned so many different things from them. I personally watch negosyo podcasts, no, but now I'd like to ask if our guests can share with us personal experiences in dealing with e-commerce startups, because like it's actually very much similar to, there's a parallelism between fraud, I mean, at least shopping, online shopping, and startups, right? So basically, like, you try until there'll be bound to you'll be bound to experience some temporary setbacks, right? I don't want to say failures, but temporary setbacks. So even like fraudulent transactions that you encountered, I would say it's a temporary setback because hopefully you learn from them, right? But so I'd like to ask, can you share with us your personal experience in e-commerce and in e-commerce startups particularly? Who'd like to go first?
Maybe Jules.
Maybe
Right.
Jules. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay. Thanks for the plug, Celine, for the podcast. Um, my experience with startups, actually, the heart and soul, the objective of the podcast when I created it, it was really to help all these new businesses that were forced, because a lot of people lost their jobs, they couldn't earn, uh, they don't have income anymore, they don't have a steady stream of income. So a lot of the entrepreneurs that we know now that are doing online selling uh, are newbies, and being newbies, they don't have the skills, the know-how, to how to make whatever that they're doing on social media effective. A lot of them are just I'll just create uh, a Facebook page. I'll post my products there, and maybe hopefully I'll make good. Somebody's gonna buy it. So that's really the objective of why I created the Negosyo podcast, is to help, to inspire first and foremost by telling the stories of how these startups, how these businesses were created. We would be able to inspire people about the grit, the determination of these new startups, and it's those kinds of stories that you know we all need now, because we are all affected in one way or another by this pandemic, by COVID-19. So it's those kinds of stories that we need to inspire us, to help us, really give us a sense of, uh, a greater sense, or a greater why we need and why we want to do business. And that's something that I've seen for many startups, especially now, uh, the informal businesses that are started in their kitchen, started in the bedroom. um, we as a community, we need to be able to collaborate and help each other. Uh, in my own way, what I'm doing is really just to help empower and educate these startups.
That
Yeah.
sounds amazing and very much in line with us, with our advocacy, no? And so I think Aloy.
I think maybe like, yeah, Alloy, since you work with an association of entrepreneurs, maybe you can share your experience as well with working with these these different entrepreneurs. How is it like, especially if it's kind of new to market? Maybe you want to share something about that.
I was gonna share that my experience with e-commerce and startups, and e-commerce startups is also the other way around because we are a startup ourselves. No? And I've dealt with both
Yeah.
startups and scale-ups. And one thing I noticed, and whenever I'm dealing with them as a customer, is on the one hand, when I'm buying from other larger e-commerce sites like Lazada, um, sometimes I get really pressured by how efficient the shipping is at times. And then, all those automated alerts and all that. So it kind of pressures me as an e-commerce owner myself to do better. And on the other hand, what I like about the smaller e-commerce is that the treatment with you is very personal, no? Like, instead of an automated alert, it's the the CEO or the founder or co-founder themselves messaging you like, "Hi, this is cha 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 cha. We'd like to thank you for buying cha cha cha. We'll put the reminders." So I find that a really interesting contrast that gives me insights and kind of inspires us with the best practices to keep on pushing forward. So dealing on the other hand with the ones in our network, uh, I would say that it has been a really good and smooth experience so far. No, there have not been like if you would find if you would expect those kind of usual quote unquote problems or growing birth pains in dealing with startups, like you know uh they suddenly run out of stock, or they suddenly need to recall inventory or something like that. Very, how should I say it, very minor bumps in the road. uh for the most part, there have not been any much problems, and I think it's a testament to seeing how commit it's a testament to how committed these startups are, really, especially now, no? To rise up again, and beyond that, keep on growing. Like, I can see that these young people, my contemporaries, are like really trying to prove themselves, trying to really make a difference, make an impact, and they're using the most accessible form of technology to them. No, is online, or in their case, if they're unable to do so on their own efficiently and effectively, they work with others. No, so one thing that we take pride in as the Roots Collective is that we bring together all these startups, all these social enterprises, and we offer collectively, unintended, no, what they are not usually able to do on their own. Kasi syempre, when they're selling on their sites, they're selling just their products, but with us, not only do they get the benefit of joining such a nice network and family to work with and exchange ideas, practices with, they also we also get to offer their products together as a one-stop shop, and like, even as a gifting center. So this, for example, like this Christmas, we're going all out with our gift sets that are targeted towards both individual and corporate consumers. Ganun.
Thanks, Alloy. I think Paul, maybe you'd like to share your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so in the spirit of collaboration, I think startups, whether they're e-commerce or not, there's many ways for a startup to die, and I think if people understand what are these things that will make them die very very quickly, it should be something that they should be sharing. So aside from running out of money, I think the situation in e-commerce is number one, their security. So I think that's what your topic is, right? So I used to work with Asia Pay, and one of the things we were looking at was the pattern recognition in the fraud. No, so that's one. That's one. When you think about it, that's something that people should be talking about, like the collaboration of startups. For example, like what Aloy was mentioning, I think it should be encouraged that all these different startups or merchants, they should be sharing their services, or what they call this, the stories that's happened for fraud to happen, para they can mitigate it collectively, because there's a pattern. All of these things have a pattern, no? Like fraud on the merchant's part, fraud on the clients. There is a pattern, no? And that's what happens when people collaborate, and that's the use of the technology, no? If you can use technology for people to see the pattern. So the way it works in e-commerce, if it was a credit card, right? There's a certain pattern, like a velocity, how often they're using it, how much they're buying, how they're canceling for example, when they're buying, if they're canceling the order, and also like we joke about it, right? But if you detect it's from Nigeria, then automatically they flag it. So why are people paranoid about a Nigerian IP address? Because that's pattern recognition, right? That's part of people collaborating with each other. But that's the thing. If you can use that collaboration mechanism for startups, then you actually improve the pattern recognition and pattern detection across the board. Also, there's a new standard for security now. They call it now the zero trust uh, approach. No, Celine was talking about trust, no. But here's the weird thing, no. When you think about it, trust is a human artifact that really doesn't work in a transactional level. I'm sure as a Filipino, that's hard to understand. Di ba? Parang, oh, I need to trust these people. But that's the point, no? Di ba? Ronald Reagan used to have this joke when he hangs out with the Russians, di ba? Doveryai, no proveryai. So in Russian, it means trust but verify. So in other words, I trust you, but I need to verify, no? So kasi di ba? Imagine,
Correct.
imagine like, and that's the other thing, because of the Data Privacy Act, no, if you do not have your a vulnerability assessment and penetration test. You don't have your bug bounty alive. You don't work with a company like Secuna.io. What will happen is, imagine for example, you're the orchestrating layer on top of it, and you get hacked, and all the emails get distributed. It's not just bad for your business. There's actually now criminal liability on your part. So you have to actually work on that layer, right? So the zero trust basically says that you need to know the roles of the people that are accessing your network, and you're constantly monitoring what they're trying to do. And if the pattern looks like this looks like parang Minority Report, maybe you're familiar with Minority Report. Minority Report, they have a concept of a precog. They're anticipating if you're going to do a crime, no? So this is, I think, what Jana, who's not here, data science, data mining on the CheckMate team. That's what you're trying to do, no? You're trying to anticipate a pattern if that's going to happen. And before that happens, you stop that person from accessing your system. So that's what you call a zero trust model. And then when they come back again, they start again from scratch. So I think what CheckMade is doing on the layer of collaboration, I think this is what will improve the security for everyone, because you need to orchestrate the collaboration amongst the different merchants so that you know the fraudulent behavior, and you improve the pattern detection and improve the pattern recognition, which is yun nga eh. And Filipinos normally, di ba, friend of friend, di ba? But I have this saying, trust is not transitive. Right? If Carlo trusts Celine, right? And I trust Carlo, right? It doesn't mean that I should trust Celine. Di ba? In the Filipino network, normal yan, di ba? Oh, Carlo, do you trust Celine? But that doesn't really work in real life, di ba? The reasons I trust Carlo and the reason Carlo trusts Celine has nothing to do with why I should trust Celine. Di ba? Kasi pwedeng magkaiba yung circumstances how you know each other. Di ba? Kunyari, your relationship, you're mentoring for Startup Village. Ako, I'm mentoring them for my, let's say, for my VC, di ba? So magkaiba, di ba? But in our minds, we're saying trust is sensitive, and that's what messes other people up. Kasi, di ba, our built-in networks and trust networks for face-to-face interactions, we bring it to e-commerce, and this is what make it very hard. And then that's how people get minor setbacks, so to speak. Yun.
And remember, Paul, it doesn't mean that just because you know people face to face that it's still consistent.
Correct. Yeah.
That trust is there, right? We're just assuming that regardless, like for example, as you mentioned, if I knew you, then you knew Celine, and then I should be able to trust Celine, and so on and so forth, right? Because of the recommendation. Even if it was face to face, it doesn't go the the trust will be consistent, right? Or the situations for the trust to be consistent would be present, right? So I agree, completely agree. But it's true, if it's not consistent offline, how can you say that it is going to be the same online as well, right? So
correct. That's why the team doing this, their team is called Nemertes, Nemertes. What they're saying is, that's why you need to have a zero trust model. Diba? In other words, you start with zero trust in the first place. And basically, if you're saying you're going to do this transaction, okay, do it. If your pattern of transaction looks like you're going to do something untrustworthy, I just cut you off from my network. So, but normally baliktad, di ba? Sa atin, because it's a Filipino network, I know you face to face, I've interacted with you, and then here's the weird thing, I let your avatar, meaning I let someone representing you, for example, Carlo from Startup Village, Carlo access my system. But it's not Carlo accessing my system. It may be his intern, his representative. So ngayon, di ba, in-overload ko yung trust ko over Carlo because in my mind, it's Carlo, it's Startup Village, but actually, the bad actor there is someone else, di ba? But because I opened a attack vector for that person, that's what messes one up. And I think that's the good thing with networks like Negosyo and Roots and Checkmate. If you can collect the patterns of fraud, if you can collect the patterns of attacks, that's what improves the response time of the network. Kasi it's the more data you gather about how these frauds are orchestrated. Yung term natin sa Pinay, modus, di ba? Na modus ka. And normally the police will send you, di ba? Parang di ba? They'll send this text, di ba? And modus operandi, meaning this is how gangs do it. So the reason they're saying that is, it might be a pattern of attack that you're unfamiliar with, but if you start knowing it, it's less likely that you fall for it. Diba? So I think that can be applied on a network level, on a startup level, on an e-commerce level. And CheckMade is perfectly poised to be like, if you want to be an orchestration layer for that kind of collaboration, it actually makes sense. Diba? There.
Yeah. Wait, pero you should trust me.
Yes. But here's the thing.
It depends, I guess.
Let's do a thought experiment. Let's do a thought experiment. My interaction, let's say, with
Julia.
Celine, di ba? May mga instances, and they say, oh, I trust her because when I asked her to do that, she did it, di ba? Lahat tayo ganun eh. We have our mental. But how do you pass that information to another person? We don't really say, when this happened, Celine, di ba? Sasabihin lang natin, it's a very fuzzy vector, di ba? I trust Celine, so you should trust her.
And
But
even
how does that
trust,
work? Di ba? But how does that work? Di ba? Parang, di ba? Parang, kunyari, parang, let's say, Julia is a lawyer. So said, oh, she's a good lawyer, di ba? Sabi mo. But what's the proof of that? Di ba? Dapat, she should have a client. She should have a client. She defended her and nanalo siya ng kaso. Di ba? Pero hindi yung, oh, she was nice to me. She's a good lawyer. Or she's a friend of Celine. So therefore,
But Paul, qualify. She's a lawyer nga eh.
I know,
Diba?
but she's a good lawyer.
I'm getting to
Yeah.
When you say she's a good lawyer, di ba may qualification, di ba? Parang that
Correct.
number of cases. I mean, ganon. But in our minds, it's easy to be transitive. Oh, I've interacted with Celine and she's trustworthy and she's friends with Julia. So malamang trustworthy si Julia and she's a good lawyer. But, di ba, you need an extra layer of verification for that. Example lang yun, di ba? And this is, if we don't refine the thinking, if we don't actually really go down the innards of why our trust systems are being hacked, di ba? Yun, di ba? Sino-social engineer ka nila, di ba? Then, if you don't know that, if you don't see the pattern, then you'll always get exploited, di ba, so to speak.
Yeah, and so with that in mind, though, how do you suggest that we find, how do startups find the perfect partner, collaborative partners? I note that other than startup to startup collaborations, there are also startup and corporation collaborations, which also have the pros and cons. So maybe, Carlo, you'd like to share more about how to find the right collaboration partner. What
Okay.
to look for.
Actually, I was just talking about this yesterday, and first you have to look for a win-win situation for both sides, right? Why? Because why will you partner or collaborate with someone where it's not win-win, right? I know that from a perspective of helping others, right? It has to be neutral and so on, but at the end of the day, right, there has to be something in it for the other person. At the very least, for as long as when I recommend or partner with you, for as long as you don't screw up with my reputation, then that's okay, right? Because at the end of the day, if we're talking about trust and collaboration, then that's very important. But if there should be a win-win situation for both. The other thing is also, you have to be cautious also, and you have to look at, as Paul mentioned, track record as well, right? Before you get married with somebody, either you date first, right? You get to know each other first before you formally come up with an agreement, right? Or before you think about the long-term partnership, or you ask other people what they think about this person or this organization, and you look at track record, so that it builds confidence and trust. And a lot of times, like what Paul said, tama siya. Hindi tayo praning when it comes to partnerships. In fact, we should be a little bit more praning nowadays because we don't know who's approaching us, especially if they're not recommended by somebody within the network, right? And I think I agree with Paul, right? Individually, when you talk about people referring other people, right, eventually there's going to be a hit or a miss somewhere, right? But if you're talking about collaborations that have gone through, a community or a group where, there's a little bit more protection because it's not just one or two people who've had experiences, right? But a group of people, then it minimizes the risk of a miss in that sense. But at the end of the day, you before you even get into a partnership, you have to make sure that the boundaries are clear. I think that the boundaries, that are unclear, that's when, you're prone to actually being taken advantage of, or when you're placed into awkward situations, right? Whether it's a simple collaboration or a partnership, like let's say with an e-commerce seller, or when you're trying to buy something from a particular platform, right? There has to be a semblance of an agreement, more or less, that will give you the trust that you need and the confidence that you need to continue on transacting. There may be some misses here and there, but you have to look at also the causes of those misses, right? But at the end of the day, like any other brand, you build that relationship, you build that over time. And if you are really honest and you are an organization with integrity, you are going to work on that reputation, and you're going to build that reputation, you're going to maintain that, and you won't risk it. Like what I said, if there's no real reason why you're trying to be fraudulent like other people, right? When from the very beginning talagang, hindi, manloloko talaga ako, then that integrity, that brand would never be built. But if you're talking about a brand that's, really striving to deliver, right, and provide what the customer wants, even if there's a miss here and there, the others will protect it, right? Na parang, hindi, okay lang yan. It might have been just a one-off. They might have had a bad day, and so on. So forgive them na. The group will protect even that partnership, right? So I think that those are some of the key things that partnerships should be considered. Whether you're a seller or a buyer, or whether you're a startup, it doesn't matter. I think the same principles would still apply.
Thanks, Carlo. Actually, those are among the things we've considered in selecting some of our partnerships, like especially aligning on mutual values and how we can mutually benefit. Like, I'd like to share, Alo, if I can, about our collaboration with Roots. So why we thought of this collaboration was because we recognized that Roots and CheckMade both cater to the same market, and it's online sellers. Roots wants to provide like a space for social enterprises to sell their items online, and back then as well in store before COVID. While CheckMade wants to help online sellers get verified and establish themselves. So we thought that, hey, maybe we should work together because we're trying to send a message of helping online sellers to the same market. And that's how we've been collaborating mutually. So what's great about our partnership with Roots is, while since we're in different industries as well, we're not really competing with each other, but mutually reinforcing like the goals of our startup.
I agree. Yeah, and also I like what Sir Carlos said earlier about we need to all be a little bit more praning because I'm a very trusting and open person. Ask Julia, she knows. Yeah. But I think one way that I've been able to sort of work around with it, well, not just me, but also my partners, no, and Roots is that, well, because Roots is actually transitioning to becoming an association and eventually a cooperative of social enterprises. And definitely, we did not include all the enterprises or merchants we've been working with in the in the in
Association.
the association or the the association
Cooperative.
or the board. No,
Cooperative.
because for starters, number one, it's not always practical to have everyone on board because coordination will be so hard, and of course we want to be more targeted in the impact we want to create. So we really vet people out no, in terms
Nice pa
of
si Aloy.
what we can do
Nice
for
ka pa,
us.
Aloy. You're being nice eh. I
Yeah.
think your
Hindi,
experience with the other companies, right, allows you to vet who goes into your cooperative or your association, correct?
yeah.
Ayun.
So syempre, it's like parang ano yan eh, parang onion layers yan kumbaga.
Yes.
So mostly we work with the entrepreneurs. Okay, sige, what do you have? So what's your products? We do a quick check on them, how they are, and then it's all good to go. Sige, you can put your products, we'll sell them for you, and then ganun. And so far, for the most part, it's been really good naman. And then yeah, we really base after a lot of time in working with these enterprises, we look at who shows potential in working with us more closely in terms of how trustworthy they are in doing things, how willing they are to step up and do beyond and do beyond a simple consigner relationship. Yeah, so that's how we built up our network talaga.
Speaking of building up your network, no, we're all pretty much very much familiar with like the informal marketplace and how much it has substantially grown in the last 6 months. Um, it's hard to think about what could possibly happen next, but basically, good entrepreneurs would be positioning for that, right? So, in terms of like trends and what you're seeing in the market, and basically what your position, what your what the trends that you're foreshadowing, and basically like with the collaboration, potential collaborations that you're working on. Could you share with us some of these um, trends and basically how you think the Philippine e-commerce market would fare post-COVID or as we transition back to a post-pandemic era?
Sorry, can I jump in on that? Just to share with you, I just heard of a statistic this morning uh, that uh, the number of new, right? Take note, new e-commerce buyers just because of the pandemic increased by 36%,
Wow.
right? And then in the provinces in the Philippines, shopping on e-commerce increased by 50 plus percent, right? So what
Wow.
does that tell us, right? People are getting a little bit more confident because they are forced to. But also to chime in on what Aloy said earlier was, you also look at the people around the organization, right? Sino ba yung kakilala mo? Sino yung circle mo? Then I would be a little bit more trusting if I knew who your circles are. But going back to that question, the trend that I'm seeing, because I'm also doing a lot of training for MSMEs right now. So on the other side, MSMEs who you want to come into the e-commerce side to become sellers, right? These are your traditional businesses that you find in the different regions who have who have limited markets. Why? Because they've been comfortable selling within their own communities, within their own specific locations, and we've been trying to encourage them to get into e-commerce, whether it's different platforms and so on. Most of them are registered, of course. But the question is, what if they had a new business or there's another group that is not yet registered, which just goes back to the point that these are the informal ones. The nice thing about what's happening right now is uh, the e-commerce platforms that we're seeing out there, they're a little bit more patient in the beginning. Why? Because they're trying to see whether or not, right, the concept that this informal seller, this new seller, would actually work first, right? Because it doesn't make sense to register if they're still testing out the market. It's expensive to, it's easy to open, but it's expensive to close, right? So there's a little bit of leeway that the e-commerce platforms that are out there to allow these guys to check out, right? But at the same time, as they're progressing, they're going to be asked to slowly register their business because they're performing well, they're selling anyway, so it's time for you to level up. But what does that tell us? Why is there a lot of new informal sellers? Because there's a demand, there's a need for them to do so because of the realities of life, right? As mentioned by Jules, a lot of people have been unemployed, have been pushed to unemployment, or people are being forced to shift careers, or they need to augment incomes and so on. So they start off informally, but they need to transition to the formal side. But I think that given this, Checkmate, as Paul mentioned earlier, is in a nice position, right, to give confidence, right, to buyers for these informal, right, initially informal sellers. Why? Because these guys are still trying to build a reputation. They're still trying to build a market for their brands. So Checkmate can come in, say, hey, these are credible people, right? They're not gonna cheat you or they're not gonna dupe you. That's why we're here, right? Because you don't just want to single out the ones that are just still trying out and just say, oh, they're new, kick them out, they're not registered, right? You're that's the bazaar concept, right? Why do bazaars and flea markets, why is it the usual test market for a lot of new entrepreneurs and new concepts? Simple, because you don't have to be registered yet because you're still trying out your concept, right? And they should still be given that opportunity. Otherwise, nobody's gonna try, right? And in fact, nobody's gonna register. Right? They're just gonna stay informal. So we need to give them a chance to be informal first, then transition them into the formal.
And what I like about Checkmate is that,
Yeah.
it really fosters more collaboration. As you get Checkmate, you get to collaborate even more with this nice network that the girls have built up.
Oh, thank you.
I think yung in terms of patterns, I think for informals, what's happening is there's a more hyper-local uh, kumbaga merchants. In other words, like, I think like the ECQ, the lockdown, forced people to look within their city. Diba? For some people like me, I'm in Mandaluyong. It's so convenient for me to cross to Makati. But the lockdown forced me to really find people around me. And the weird thing was there were many new parang mga shops opening around me, new services. Like one of my close friends was in Makati and he moved his commissary. Maybe familiar, like si Paulo Soler, di ba, that he's known as a surfer, and he opened this in Asal, and he moved his commissary to Mandaluyong because it's cheaper, probably, and it's also central, and so now parang for me that's like, oh, I would love to support you as a friend, but now we're actually in the same city. So it's easier to support you kasi that means it's cheaper for me. And number two, in my mind, I'm supporting a local entrepreneur, di ba? So I think that's what's gonna happen in the as more people understand some of the nuances nitong lockdown. There will be very very hyper local services that we really didn't see before. And I think like what Ali was saying, like if you have like CheckMade orchestrating some of these collaborations, because there's a discovery issue also, right? Like I'd like to know, for example, who are the merchants in my city, right? Who are these new informal parang sellers, so I can support them. It would be nice that, di ba, a Checkmate becomes also like a discovery channel for people who wanna support local consumption.
I may add to what Paul said. I totally agree about being hyper local. I too live in the Mandaluyong area, and if I don't know if you notice in Facebook, there's so many hyper local pages. Like there's like food sellers
Yes.
Mandaluyong, there is buy and sell Mandaluyong, and in those uh, platforms, in those pages, people will do transactions like every day. There's so many transactions there. Like people just post, "Oh, I'm hungry. Does anybody deliver in Barangay Highway Hills? Free shipping, please." So it's those kinds of hyper localized transactions which I'm seeing now is becoming the trend. Because one, since we are going transitioning to online, people want to get the most out of their money. If they can have food or whatever delivered to their doorstep without free shipping, that can be done if the business is hyper local.
I think Julia, yeah, that's so true. We're all going hyper local, and I think Julia has one last question before we wrap up.
Yeah, maybe just maybe final words to the audience on tips on how they can really benefit from this new normal and how they can enhance their startup or get into the startup scene.
Get in touch with the seller. Like, reach out personally to the seller, especially if they're small. They'll respond.
If
You
you're
should.
trying to start something, just start it. You know, like it's better to live with disappointment than regret. That's what the Winklevoss brothers used to say. Like it's better that you start something and you know that you're bad at it than you always wonder if you should have started it and you never find out. And then contact Carlo, pa-mentor ka kay Carlo sa Startup Village.
Thanks for the plug, Paul.
Di ba?
Maybe last words for me is at the end of the day, the world has changed, and we know we all need to adapt to it one way or another. The rules of the game that hasn't necessarily changed, but we have to adjust also our paradigm. We need to protect ourselves also because the situations are a little bit more different. So we need to look at how the new tools, the new organizations, the new startups can actually help us improve the way we live our lives, CheckMade included, especially when you're talking about e-commerce. But there are a lot of other organizations that are doing the same because the new problems need to be solved. And these startups are the ones who are doing that. And in the process, I know I said earlier na we need to be a little bit more praning, right? True. We need to be a little bit more cautious, but it doesn't mean that we don't collaborate or work with others, even if we are competing with them, right? In fact, I've been working with a lot of our competitors. Why? Because it's win-win. We bring each other up, right? We need to help each other so that we all become successful. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. And Jules?
Last words from me. You want to start a business, just start it. Just to echo what Paul said, you are never going to get it right the first time, but just start it. And if you want to become, have that badge of legitimacy, have yourself CheckMade.
Yes. Thank you. All right, so that's pretty much it. I just want to say thank you so much to our guests, Carlo, Paul, Jules, and Aloy. Thank you, Kubo. I'm Celine. You should trust me. Definitely trust me. I learned so much from this. But it's also very clear that, like Einstein once said, right, that in every crisis there's an opportunity, and those people who will make it strong are those who can pivot, who know how to adapt and be flexible and agile. And in this world, yes, you trust, but you must verify as well. Yes, also there's room to be praying and cautious, but also I would say cautiously optimistic. So you deploy capital cautiously, but also hope and pray and do everything and do your best every day. There is room for everybody in the Philippine startup scene. The Philippines is definitely on its way towards making a global impact if we all just work together and we believe in the power of the Filipino. So thank you so much for joining us and for being part of the collaboration and security in e-commerce startups. Celine again, and have a great afternoon. Bye, everybody.